All right, let's get started with our first Illustrator project. The first thing you need to do is download your student files. Once you've downloaded them, if you go into your download folder, you will see that they are a zip folder. You have to unzip them before you can use them. So on a PC, you just right click and say extract all, and it's going to ask you where do you want to save them. I'm just going to leave them in my downloads so I can show you. So this is the folder you want to use, the unzipped folder. And you can see they've split it into the Illustrator files and into the InDesign files. So the first file we're going to be working on is called Icons, and you'll notice that it is also zipped. You have to unzip that before you can start using it. So make sure you have everything unzipped that you need to use before you start. They will not import into Illustrator correctly if they are not unzipped. So you'll see there is a folder called the Illustrator User Interface. This is not required for this class, but if you've never touched this software before, you may want to go ahead and go through this. I will be showing you a lot of what this says as we go, but it has a lot of good information like all of the different tools. Let's go ahead and go to this week's chapter. So this is called Project 1 Art Camp Icons. So think about if somebody had given us a raster or a bitmap image. I went over that in the last video. And that is an image that was made with pixels. There are many different ways that you can turn that into the math that you need for a vector image. This is the first way that you can do it. So it's showing us we're going to just kind of basically hand draw these on top of the raster images and then get rid of the original images. That way we have images we can use on a bigger artwork as a mathematical vector. So think about if somebody gave you something that they had hand drawn like this. We would not really be able to use this in an artwork, so we're going to create vectors out of these. So let's go ahead and get started in Illustrator. So we're going to say new file, and it's going to pop this up on the screen. Go ahead and click on print and tell us CMYK color, which is what we will need for print. RGB is usually what you would use for web or video. And it defaults to points. We're going to go ahead and change that to inches. We're going to make this 12 inches in width and 12 inches in height. And we're going to call this Art Icons. CMYK is correct and we don't want any bleed. Go ahead and click Create. Now it has created this for us, but it hasn't saved it anywhere that we know. You'll see that it's got an artboard called Art Icons. Now we need to actually save it. So go up and say File, Save As. And I'm going to go to an area I have created called ARV110 on my computer. And you can see here are the student files that I made. Now you don't want to save things directly into that folder or it's going to get confusing. I've made a folder called Amy Work in Progress, and sometimes the book will refer to your work in progress folder. It just means a folder where you put your work. So let's double click on that. I'm going to put it inside this folder. I may want to go ahead and make another folder because by the end of this class we're going to have a bunch of stuff in here. So this is the Icons chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. Now the book just wants you to call it Art Icon. I'm going to go ahead and call it what I want to call it when I turn it in. So that would be my name dash last name dash Art Icons Illustrator. So this is using search engine optimization. You always need to start naming your files in something that would help Google find it on a search engine. So your name, what it is, what program it uses. So that's the type of file I'm going to want you to turn in using search engine optimization. So let's go ahead and call it something like that. Of course, you put your name there and hit save and tell this, okay? And now you can see it's actually named it something proper and it's putting it where it needs to be. Now we're going to go up to Edit, Preferences, just go to General, and under Smart Guides, make sure all of these are turned on except for construction guides. Now they should be turned on already, and that's perfect. They're just showing you where this is. Smart Guides is very important for this lesson. So go ahead and click OK. Now we need to make sure that Smart Guides is visible. Go up to View and make sure Smart Guides is turned on right here with this checkbox. Let me go ahead and show you what Smart Guides is. If I were to make a box and then make another box and then start moving it around, do you see those little magenta lines that are showing up? Those are our Smart Guides. So it's telling me that will be aligned to the bottom. When I get to the middle, do you see it kind of will click and tell me I'm right at the middle point? There it goes. It just helps you, and it's going to refer to these smart guides as we go along. So you always want to make sure you have smart guides on. So to make sure that we're all the same, everybody go to Window, Workspace, and make sure we're all in the Essential Classic workspace so that it'll look the same as mine. I want to explain a couple things about the selection tools. So the first selection tool up in the toolbar is called the Main Selection Tool, and the second one is called the Direct Selection Tool. The selection tool will select an entire shape, whereas the Direct Selection Tool will select just one anchor point within that shape. Once again, the selection tool is the whole thing. The direct selection tool will just get one point. There's another thing that it does. Let's say we have a group of things. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a copy of this really quick and change the color so you notice. And then I'm going to group these together. So now I have a group. Do you see they're moving as a group? If you want to just get one part of the group, you can go to the Direct Selection Tool, and then you can just grab one of them. So the Direct Selection Tool, so just think of the Direct Selection Tool as being the detail and the Selection Tool being the whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and delete these, and let's get started with what the book wants us to show. So one thing the book wants you to do is go to Window and turn off this thing called the contextual taskbar that's right here. I'll show you what it is. What it is this little mini taskbar that has all kind of things that will help you, and you can pick it up and move it around. It's just a little distracting when you first start using, so if you want to leave it on, you can. The book is asking you to go ahead and turn this off right now. So that is in Window, Contextual taskbar. Go ahead and turn that off. So we're going to go ahead and grab the rounded rectangle tool that is underneath the regular rectangle tool, which is the fourth one down on the left column. So grab the rectangular, choose the rounded rectangular tool. Then we're going to click right here to choose our default fill and stroke, which will be white, which is saying that it's going to create a shape that has white in the center and a stroke that is black. So with that tool open, we're just going to click once on the top of the page near the top left corner. And it's going to pop up this rounded rectangular box. Now this is called constrained proportions. If it's in the locked position, then whatever you type in the width is going to be the same as the height. The book is asking you to turn it off just so that you can see that they're different. So if we put 5 here in width and then 5 inches in height, and we set the corner radius to 0.5 inches, we're telling it that we want a 5 by 5 inch box with rounded corners that are 1/2 inch. So go ahead and hit OK, and it has created that shape for us. This time we're going to grab just a regular rectangle tool. Once again, click and hold your mouse and put it kind of near the top of this. You can see your smart guides appear. So put your mouse back up there until it intersects, and then just drag it down. So you keep moving it until you get it right at 5 inches. Now, the book doesn't tell you this, but I'm going to give you a secret. I'm having a hard time getting it exactly 5 inches. So I'm going to get pretty close. And then I'm going to go right here and I'm going to just type in 5. And now I know that it's perfect. So you can do it either way, both works. So in the transform panel, make sure that this is turned on so that they are linked together. And we can make a regular rectangle turn into a rounded rectangle. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell this to go to 0.5, and now it's exactly the same as the first one. It's just showing you 2 different ways to make this rectangle. So we've got 2 rectangles, but now we need to kind of make sure that they're in the right place. So let's turn on something called rulers. So go up to View and make sure Rulers is turned on. And you can see that it's telling us whatever unit we have, we chose inches. It's telling us that this is 12 by 12. So let's choose the first rectangle. And here in Transform, do you see these little dots over here? This is where it's telling us that it's going to transform from. So right now we have the middle reference point chosen, which means if we transform it, make it bigger, make it smaller, rotate it, whatever we do to it, it's going to go from that point. We need to choose this upper left reference point. And now I want you to go here to X and tell it we want that upper left reference point to be at 0.75 inches, and go ahead and hit enter. Do you see it moved it over a little bit? So it's going right directly from that last point because that is the reference point we chose. Now in the Now in the Y field, we need to do the same thing. We want that left corner to be at 0.75 inches. So that's exactly where it needs to be on the page. Let's go ahead and save. Control S is save, or you can go up to File and say Save. Notice I just did it, so it's grayed out. So let's make sure these are lined up. We're just going to use the Smart Guides. Click once with the selection tool and drag it down until you see the center points are the same. So we know that they are aligned in the center. Let go. Now from this one, we want to choose to the upper right-hand corner reference point. So we want to make sure it's on the page correctly by that point. And for X on this one, we need to be at 11.25 on X. And you can click Tab to go down to Y. And Y needs to be at 11.25. So now we have two squares. I have this one selected. You can see it has the blue around it. So let's go ahead and click and hold Shift and then click the second one, and you can see they're both blue, so both of them are selected. We're now going to make a copy of these first two. We now have both of those selected. I'm going to click Alt or Command and hold it down. Now click and drag your boxes until you get two more boxes. When you let go, you should have 4 boxes on the screen. And we're going to choose this bottom reference point, and we're going to make sure that it is at 11.5 Y. So we know that it's at the right place. So we know that it's on the right place on the page. Let's go ahead and save. Control S. So with the selection tool, let's select this top box. And we're going to open the swatches panel. It should be the third one down if you're in Essentials Classic. And you can kind of pull this open to make it a little bit bigger. So you can see we have both the fill and the stroke. So we're going to kind of do this backwards just to show you how it works. If you click on the stroke one first, you see it came to the top. And we're going to choose this one right here. If you hover over it, it's called CMYK Cyan. Go ahead and click on that one. And you can see that it's changed the stroke of the box that we had selected to be cyan. Now I want you to click on the fill, and we're going to make that one black. Now that's actually the opposite of what we need to do. And the reason we did it that way is just to show you that there's this cool little button right here where you can flip them. So we've got the first box in the right color. Now we need to go to the stroke panel, which there's several places you can do this. Here's the stroke panel, so you can open that up and you can change it right here. And we're going to change it to 5. You could also change it in the properties panel. Right here, you could change it to 5. And you can also change it up here. So the book tells you different places to do it, different times, just to teach them to you. Now one cool thing that Illustrator does is you can put everything that you've done in this shape onto this shape. So let's go ahead and select the second shape with the selection tool, and then grab this eyedropper tool and click on the first shape. And you can see it's taken what we've put there and it's changed it and put it onto the second one. So now make sure this one is selected. We're going to go back to the swatches panel. And for this one, we're going to choose this one right here that says CMYK Magenta. Now make sure that you are on the fill, not the stroke, and click the CMYK Magenta. So going to go to the bottom left. We're going to make that CMYK Yellow. We're going to make sure our stroke is still black, and let's change that stroke to 5 points. For the fourth box, let's go ahead and change our stroke to 5 points. Make sure that we are on fill, and we're going to change that one to this second light orange. Now if we go to our layers panel, which should be right behind properties, and click on the little swirl down the caret, you can see that we have 4 rectangles. We have 4 rectangles, and they're all on separate layers for us within this top layer. One of the things that's good about looking in the layers panel is this little eyeball can turn off a layer and turn it back on. So it's still there where it's just not visible. And we can also lock layers so that now you can't pick it up or do anything with it. So if you know you've got something that you don't want to accidentally move, you can just lock it and then come back and unlock it. So if you slowly click twice on the word layer 1, you can rename it. So we're going to rename that backgrounds. If you're having a problem renaming it, just double click on the little icon and it's going to pop this up and you can rename it right there. So easiest way to do it is either double click on the little teeny icon picture or double click on the word backgrounds. Let's go ahead and lock that layer. Just click right here next to the eyeball. So now all 4 of those are locked. We're going to go to the bottom of the layers panel and click this little plus sign to make a new layer. We're going to call that layer icons. And so now everything that we draw needs to be on this actual icon layer, and we've locked that so we don't accidentally draw onto the background layer. We need to go ahead and import the template that they sent us. So go to View and say Fit Artboard in Window. That'll just make this next part easier. Now we're going to say to File. Now we're going to go to File, Place, and go find where you downloaded your student files. So here are my student files, and here are my icon. Here's my icon folder. Remember, I told you needed to unzip it. Here is the original artwork that was created that we're going to draw over the top of. So go ahead and click on that once. But before you place it, make sure you're going to click Template. We don't want this file to actually show up and be printed. We're just using it as a template that we're going to draw over the top of. So hit Place, and it should place it directly in the middle. If it's not in the middle, it's okay. Just pick it up and move it over there. And one thing I want you to notice is that it has made this a different type of layer over in the Layers panel. Notice that it put it beneath our icon layer, and it went ahead and locked it, and it made it a different type of looking layer. It is just a template layer, so it's not like all the other layers. You can still turn it on and off as far as visibility goes, but it is not the same as a regular layer. So if we double click on the thumbnail, we can see that different things about the template. It is a template, and it's dimmed to about 50%. Let's go ahead and change that to 25% and say okay. So it's kind of see-through. And now we're going to start drawing this first shape. So let's Alt and scroll our mouse to zoom in, spacebar, and bring this down so that it's in the center of the screen. Go ahead and grab the rectangle tool that we've used before, and we want to click this default. So it's going to go back to normal. Notice it's one stroke, white and black. We want to make sure to click on Fill and say we want it to be filled with nothing. So click None. So it's just going to make us a box that has a 1 point black stroke. And make sure you are on the icons layer, because you can't draw on these other 2 layers. They are locked. So make sure you're on the icons layer, and then just click and drag a basic shape that is the size of the bottom of the clapboard. Let's go over here to Properties and click this top left reference point, and you can see it's not exactly correct. We need to make sure the width is exactly 4 inches, and hit the tab and make sure the height is 2.5 inches. Make sure that is selected, and you're going to go up to Edit, Copy, and then go back to Edit and say Paste in Front. So there's now 2 rectangles on the screen. You maybe can't see them. If I go over to the Layers menu, you'll see that there's actually 2 rectangles. And you can tell right here that I actually have the top rectangle selected. So we need to take that box and make it about the 1/4 of the size as it already is. And we don't want to have to use math. So the easiest way to do this is we're going to choose the bottom left reference point and go up here to the height and click /4. Basically, we need that to be divided by 4 and hit enter. Notice it has made it a 1/4 the height that it should be. So now making sure that you are on that box, let's go ahead and move it up to where it should be and use your smart guides to make sure that it is level. So now with that box selected, let's do this copy paste again. So Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Front. Now with that one selected, we need to make this a lot. With that top rectangle selected, and we're still on the bottom left reference point, we need to go to the width and say /8, enter. And it's made a 1/8 width the size of that. So you don't have to actually do any math. I'm not very good at math. Let's make one more copy. With your selection tool, grab the original box that we made, copy, paste in front. And on this one, I want you to grab the direct selection tool. With the selection tool, just click the bottom part of this box and drag it up until it matches. Grab the top, pull it down until it matches, and the sides. And you can click anywhere away from this just to unselect that box. And let's start making these horizontal lines. So click once to make sure that we are on this box, and I'm going to zoom in, Alt scroll my mouse so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to get the shear tool. It is nested right underneath this scale tool. So click and hold your mouse down. That is the shear tool. Now, a couple of things to show you about this. Do you see that little green dot that's in the middle? That is kind of like the reference point for the shear tool. If I were to start shearing it just by grabbing it, do you see that it's staying at that center point? I'm going to say Control Z to undo what I just did. And I'm going to pick up that little center point, and I'm going to pick up that little center point, and I'm going to bring it down here to this lower left until I see anchor and drop it there. Now when I move the shear tool, do you see that it's actually doing it based on that point? And you can see that little green anchor point has been added down there. So I'm just going to do this manually and hit and then let go. So once you've got that looking right, let's go back to the selection tool and click on it. Make sure that that box is selected, and I want you to double click on the selection tool. And it's going to bring up this move tool box. So what I want it to do is I want it to move it over a certain amount. So I need to make sure that horizontal is just 1 inch, vertical should be nothing, and make sure your angle is at 0. Do you see if I click on preview, it's actually moved it over that 1 inch. Now that's great, except for I want to keep the original one. So I'm going to, instead of hitting OK, I'm going to click copy. So you see we now have 2. Now we've got to do this a couple of more times. Instead of having to do that exact same thing, I'm just going to go Object, Transform, Transform again. And you can see that that is Control D. So let's click Transform again, and it's done the exact same thing. That works for any transform. So this time let's just do Control D. We now have our 4 horizontal boxes. So now with your selection tool, just click and drag over the top of all of these to see that they're all selected. And we're going to group those together. So you can either say Object, Group, or you can say Control G. So if we look up here in our layers panel, all of those are all together in one group. If we turn them off, you can see they all turn off together. They are a group. So with that group selected, you make sure it's selected by, if the green right here, the green is on. Now making sure that I have that group selected, I'm going to say Object, Transform, Reflect, and I want to make sure that it is on horizontal, angle is 0, and I'm going to say Copy. Now we have 2 groups, one that is facing one way and one that's facing the other way. Go ahead with your selection tool, grab the top one and move it to where it should be. Now we're going to grab the rotate tool. When we click on the rotate tool, you'll notice in the center is a little green dot. So that is saying where we're going to rotate from. If we were to start rotating, do you see that it's rotating from that green center? That's not really what we want. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z. I'm going to pick up that little center in the rotate tool, and I'm going to pick up that little center and drag it down to the lower left-hand corner until I see that it's on the path. Now, when I click my mouse anywhere up near the upper right-hand corner and drag it up, do you see that it is rotating from that little green point? And you can see that green point is down there. I'm let mine at 4.75, and I'm going to let go of my mouse. And now we've kind of got that set up correctly. Let's save our work. Grab your selection tool. We're going to make sure this group is selected. Then click the Shift key and make sure this path is selected. And let's go and change the fill of all of this stuff to white. So because we use the selection tool, it selected everything within there. If we go back and grab our direct selection tool, we can click just one shape. So click outside of this to unselect everything and select just one of these. You can see just that is selected. So I'm going to use that little tool we learned where we can flip-flop them. So click the swap. The only problem with that is now we have a white stroke. So we're going to click on the strokes and say I want no stroke. That looks pretty good. We need to make all of these the same. So let's remember that tool we learned before, which was the eyedropper tool. So click the next one. Eyedropper, we want it to look the same. Click the next one, eyedropper. Now you might wonder, how am I doing that really easily? While I'm in the eyedropper tool, I can click Control and it will bring me the selection tool. So just hold down Control, you can select the next one. When you let go of Control, you go back to the last tool you were in. So once again, Control, click, Control, click, Control, click. Okay, the last thing we need to do is we're going to use the selection tool. Let's grab that inner box and make sure it is filled with white. So you can click right here. This is a good place to do it. Click and hold your mouse down and just choose white. Click the big rectangle, click and hold down, and let's make this black. That looks pretty good. Everybody save your work, Control S. Now it's almost perfect, but we need to change one other thing. If you notice on the original, let me turn this off for a second. Do you see how it's kind of rounded at the bottom? Ours is not rounded at the bottom. So we could use these little tools. Let me select this box. Do you see these little dots? What they do is they turn a rectangle into a rounded rectangle. The problem here is that we don't want all of them to be rounded, just two on the bottom. So I'm going to undo that, Control Z, and let's go back and let's get our direct selection tool and just select these bottom two. So click and drag your mouse over these bottom two. Do you see how they look a little bit different? Mine are dark red and these are white. So it's telling me these two are selected and not those two. So now we can click that and drag it until it says 0.25. Perfect. Now with your selection tool, click and drag to select all of that stuff and say Control G, which will group it all together. If you look up here in our icons, all of those are together in a group. We have made the first icon. Save your work and let's keep going. So I'm going to space bar and move over to this one. This one we're going to be making with circles. So make sure this is not selected anymore. Just click anywhere off of it. And let's grab the ellipse tool. It's right underneath the rectangle tool. And let's choose the default fill and stroke, but change fill to none. So just click on fill, none. So put your mouse in the middle of this and click Alt and then drag outwards. When you click Alt, it will draw from the center. So we're going to do this until it is 0.5 inches and hit and then let go. So let's open back up that contextual bar that it wanted us to close a while back. Go up to Window and turn on the contextual taskbar. One of the things that's good about that, and of course you can move it around, is it's got this really easy little duplicate right here. So go ahead and click that once. And if you notice up in your layers panel, we now have two ellipses. It's just an easier way other than copy and paste. So now we can grab that one and hit Alt and Shift at the same time. And it's going to draw it bigger from the center. And when we hit Shift, it's going to make it exactly a circle. We need to go into about 1.25. Now we have our second circle. And we need to do this twice more. Let's make another duplicate. Grab the corner, Alt and Shift, and drag that until it is 1.7 inches. Duplicate again, Alt and Shift, and make this one 4 inches. Save your work. Now go back up and grab this tool right here, which is the line segment tool. With the line segment tool, hover your mouse until you see it says center. Click the Alt key and then drag down to make a 4.25 inch line, and it should be at 270 degrees. Now, one of the things that's kind of hard sometimes with your mouse, or especially if you're using a trackpad, to get it exactly. I'm going to get it close and then I'm going to go back and fix it. So if we go to the properties panel, we can see that it's almost at 270 and it's almost at 4.25 like the book wanted it to be. I'm going to make sure I'm on the center point, right, center reference point, and I'm just going to type in 270 to make sure it's exactly there. And I'm going to type in 4.25 to make sure it's exactly what the book asked for. So if you can't get it exact with your mouse, you can over there in the properties panel. So go ahead and get the selection tool. And because that's selected, our contextual bar will come back up. We're going to go ahead and make a duplicate of that object. So we now have two lines. And this line, we're going to go up here to properties, make sure it's in the center, and this one needs to be at 270. This one needs to be at 290. So if you see in our layers, we have the top line selected. We now need to select this other line. So click Shift and click on your original line. Notice both of those are selected. In our transform tool, because they're both selected, whatever we do to it is going to change both of them. So let's change this to 25%. Perfect. So I'm going to go away from the way the book shows you to do this because I think it is very confusing for students. So if you want to go along with the book, if I start confusing you, you can go back to the way the book is doing it. But this next part, I'm just doing it separately. The book is using something called the Pathfinder, which is right here. And this is a way that you could join things together. So let me kind of show you this off to the side. If we had two rectangles, I'm going to Alt drag and make a second rectangle. If I select both of these and use Pathfinder, I can do various things, like I could unite them. Do you see that it's just one shape now? Control Z, I could minus the front, Control Z. I could just divide them all, and now they're all completely separate. You see it's divided them all into separate things. Pathfinder is a great way, but I think if you are brand new to this, it may be a little confusing. So we're going to do this a little bit differently. Let me delete all of this that I just made. All right, so we're going rogue, we're going off the book. So the book has you doing this later, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now because I think the way they have it is confusing. You can notice that we've got this circle basically the right size, but it isn't, it doesn't look the same as the original icon. What we're going to do is change this to be a heavier stroke. So go to this stroke panel, and instead of 1, let's change this to be an 8-point stroke. So we now have an 8-point stroke of black. But you can see it looks the right size, but it's kind of in the wrong space. That is because it did something called it center aligned the stroke, which means if it's an 8-point stroke, it put 4 points on one side and 4 points on the other side. So we're going to go down here instead of putting it in the center, I want you to put all of those 8 points on the inside. Now it looks just like it's supposed to. If we had clicked outside, it would have put everything outside the original circle that we drew. So once again, make sure the inside, it's aligned to the center. Now that's perfect, but this is still just a circle that has an 8-point stroke. We need this to be an actual shape. So go up to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. So what it has done is it took this path and it turned it into an actual shape. So you can see it's actually a shape. If I were to move it off to the side, you can see that it's an actual shape. Now we're ready to do this in a different way than the book. So with your selection tool, I want you to click and drag over all of these shapes that we've created. And instead of using the Pathfinder, we're going to use the Shape Builder tool, which is this one right here. When you click on the Shape Builder tool, what it's going to do is we're going to say we want these to be actual shapes, not just lines that are intersecting each other. So if you hover over something, do you see it turns gray? We're telling it, yes, we want that to be a separate shape. We want this to be a separate shape. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now, because I had black selected when I was just doing that shape, it turned it black. Let me go ahead and change that to another color so that'll help you understand. So back in the Shape Builder tool, if we hover over this and I just click it once, it creates its own shape that looks like that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and make these two inner ones their own shape. We need this little thing to be its own shape, and this one. Now the difference with the middle is we need this whole thing to be one shape. So I want you to click and hold your mouse down and then drag around. You see it's adding all of these things into one shape. That's the way the center is supposed to look. Now for this one, I need you to click and drag down over both of these little sections so that all of that is included in one shape. Click and drag down over the first one and the second one. Perfect. Now, of course, it's completely the wrong color and all of that. Now, the last thing we haven't done is we didn't tell it that these little things in the middle were shapes. So if we tried to change the color of them, right now they're just see-through. Let me move this over to the side and show you. You see there's not actually anything there. Everything else is its own shape. So in the Shape Builder tool, make sure you actually click those two little center things to tell them that is also a shape. So now that we're done with that, I know it looks a little weird. Let's grab the selection tool and just deselect everything and get the direct selection tool. And let's click these little extra things that are sticking out. We just needed those to make our pass, but we don't need We just needed those to make our shapes, but we don't need them anymore. So click once and we have it selected. Click delete on your keyboard and it's going to get rid of the path. If you click delete again, it's going to get rid of those 2 anchor points. So go around and click delete twice. Select, delete, delete, select, delete, delete. Okay. If you select this big shape, we can go into the swatches panel and make it white, the same as this one on this side. We can select this little crescent in here. It also needs to be white. These big rectangles need to be 70% black, which would be the 4th one over in the swatches panel. These smaller little areas need to be 30% black, which is the 4th one from the right. These big wedges need to be black, and the very center needs to be white. Oh, I accidentally clicked this one. So that's looking pretty good. Let's get our selection tool, select all of these, and then you can click group right here in your contextual bar, or you can say Control G, or you can go to object and group. You can see we now, up in the layers panel, we have 2 groups that are our 2 separate icons that we have made. So let's save our work. All right, let's start on this one. We're going to go to where the rectangle tool was, but this time grab the polygon tool. Click once anywhere down here, and it's asking us what we need to do. We want to do a 1.5 inch polygon with 3 sides, and it has made it for us. Now let's go ahead and while it's selected, let's go ahead and click default fill and stroke. And I'm going to kind of move it up to where it should go. So now grab the direct selection tool and click anywhere off. Make sure you're just on this one anchor point. Notice that it's a different color from the other 2. And go ahead and drag that up so that it matches our drawing. And we're going to do the same with the other side. Now grab the selection tool to make sure the whole thing is selected. And we're going to go back over here to stroke. And let's change this stroke from 1 to 30. And tell it to draw it on the inside. Now let's go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. And we have made that part pretty easy. So now we have done that one pretty good. And while that's selected, go ahead and choose Default Fill and Stroke. And if you turn off your template, you can see we actually have what it's supposed to look like because our background is still there. I just turned off the visibility of our template and you can see we have got a perfect little protractor there. So for this thing, we're going to use a new tool and it's called the Shaper tool. It is right here underneath where we just made the polygon. So what the Shaper tool does is you can draw just a basic shape and it understands, oh, that's a circle. You could draw a basic square. It kind of just guesses what it thinks you need. It just kind of understands. So it's just another drawing tool. Let me delete all of this and I'll show you how we're going to work with this. So you're just going to grab the Shaper tool and make sure that we are in the default fill and stroke. We don't really need any fill, so let's turn that off. We're just going to draw a stroke. I'm just going to click and drag straight down to make a line. You can see my line's horrible, but when I let go, it understands that I wanted an actual line. So get them as close as you can to joining at the top, but don't worry about that right now, and just draw 2 lines. And then we need to draw this other line. Perfect. Now zoom in a little bit because we need to draw the circle. And draw a circle the best you can at about the right shape. Now it defaults to be gray. I'm just going to grab mine with the direct selection tool and kind of put it where it should be. And I'm going to turn off the fill so I can see. If you need to adjust it, you can. Mine is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and change that stroke to 5 points on the inside. Pretty nice. And if you're not sure if it's an exact circle, you could just go to properties and look, it says yeah, it is an exact circle because they're both 5.48. So you could always change it right here so that it's an exact circle if you accidentally draw something that's not a circle. So once you've got your circle right, let's go into the layers panel and you can see there's my ellipse. I'm going to go ahead and lock that so I don't accidentally mess with it. And let's kind of go down here. I'm going to hit the space bar. Let's go down to this one and I want this to be 5 points. We're going to change the other 2 in just a second. But before we do that, we want to kind of cut these off so that they don't look so that we can change these differently. So we're going to select this one line and we're going to go get the scissors tool, and it is underneath the eraser. If you click and hold your mouse down, you'll see the scissors tool. So just find a point. I'm going to zoom in. Find a point on the path and just click it. And you see it has actually, and it's actually made these into two separate lines. If I move it, it's two separate lines now. So let's do something to the other side. I'm going to space bar and move my mouse over to this other one. I'm going to select this line, get my scissors tool, and then just click once. Now those are two separate lines. Now before we change the width of these, let's make sure that these top two are actually joined together. So I got mine really close. I'm going to zoom in, Alt, but we need to make sure that those are actually joined together. So I'm going to click and drag over both of these to make sure both of those lines are selected. I'm going to get the join tool. It's underneath the shaper tool that we just used. So this one called join. And you can just kind of drag over these two things and you see it joined them together. So now let's select those again, and when we change the width of this, it's going to change them both at the same time. So the width of this needs to be 10. Now notice, because we cut this off at the bottom, it did not change the width of those because we separated them. The only thing that's weird is this top thing doesn't look right. So while this is still selected here in stroke, I'm going to change this corner from the pointed corner to right here, which is a bevel join. And that looks more like it's supposed to look. I'm also going to change this from a rounded cap. Let's look at what it looks like down here. You see how it's rounded? I'm going to change this to right here, which is a projecting cap. Now we can change these. I'm going to click that one, Shift, click this one, and these need to be 3 points and with the projecting cap, which is this one. So let's kind of zoom back out, and I'm going to make sure everything is unlocked in this, and let's select all of this stuff that we've just done. And I need to change these from being paths into being shapes like we did before. So I'm going to say Object, Path, Outline, Stroke. So it's now changed all of those into shapes. And now we're going to use the pathfinder that it wanted us to use before. So that should be right here. If you can't find it, go to Window, Pathfinder. And we're going to click Unite, which is going to make all of these shapes into one shape. If you look up here, you see they're all together in one. Oh, looks like I had one thing left out right there, so it didn't put that together. Let's do that. I'm going to do that again. Okay, so I did not have that selected, so notice it's still a line and it's not a shape. So let me do this separately. I'm going to say Path, Outline, Stroke, and now I can add it in by saying Unite. There we go. Now everything is all together in one. Save your work, Control S. Let's go ahead and pick that up and put it over the top of the first shape that we made. And then we're going to click and drag to select all of these, and we're going to group them together. Group. All right, we're almost done. Let's draw this last icon. Okay, make sure nothing is selected. We're going to get the pencil tool, which is hidden underneath the shaper tool. And if you double click on that, you can see it has a bunch of different choices. So if you were to try to draw with the pencil tool, it's kind of hard to draw special shapes. So if you double click the pencil tool, it's going to show you all kind of choices. Let me kind of talk about this for a second. I'm going to choose the default fill and stroke and just draw with it. It's got kind of some weird little areas and stuff. Let me undo that, Control Z. And I'm going to double click again, and this time I'm going to make my smoothness up to about 3/4 of the way there. So go ahead and change that on yours and make sure Keep Selected is there. Close Paths, and then we want to uncheck Edit Selected Paths and hit OK. Now let's go ahead and try and draw the palette shape. Now you can see this is supposed to be kind of fluid, so it doesn't have to be perfect. You can always click Control Z to undo. But even though it's not perfect, I've got the fidelity turned up, so it's going to kind of smooth it back out again. And do you see that little white circle? That's telling me that it's going to join those together. If you don't see the white circle, you're kind of not close enough. When I let go, do you see how it kind of smoothed out that little bubble that I had right there? That's pretty good. If you don't like the way it looks, you can always go back to the direct selection tool and just kind of move some things around to make it look better the way you want. I'm just going to kind of move these paths a little bit, but it looks pretty good to me. All right, using the same situation, we're going to create the other shapes that are in here. Make sure you see that little circle so that it closes it. Now with your selection tool, let's click these and make them black. Just going to flip it. We're going to select this one and make sure it is filled with white. The main palette should also be filled with white. And now let's turn off the visibility of our icons layer. And you can see we need to be able to see through this, and we can't right now. So let's select these bottom two. We want the palette and then shift and click the little innermost point. So we want to click the palette, shift, and click that shape also. Notice we've got both of those shapes selected. And now we want to go to the Pathfinder, and we want to use the one called minus front. So with your selection tool, click and drag to select all of those, and we're going to group them. Control G or click group right here, and you'll notice they are all grouped together as one. So turn back on your template, and we've got one more thing to draw. So for this, I want you to go get your rectangle tool. Make sure it's on the default, but then turn the fill to none and draw a rectangle that is the size of this. Don't worry about the bottom part, just make the top part match. So let's go to the transform panel, and you can see we need this to be rounded. So we're going to go over here to the rounded rectangle tool and make sure this is not linked together. So let's go ahead and change this. Oh, that's too much. So it looks like 0.125 looks pretty good. So on these top two corners, we're going to make it 0.125. Notice the bottom, it needs to be still straight. Let's go get the direct selection tool, because you remember the direct selection tool, we could choose just one of these points. So zoom in, Alt, scroll your mouse, and choose just this one point, and let's move it over, and choose just this one point and move it over. That's looking pretty good. Now we can make sure that is selected and flip it, so now it is black. The last thing that we can do is go get our pencil tool again and just draw a basic shape up here. And everybody's is going to look a little bit different. We're going to fill that with black. So now I want you to select select the top part, shift, select the second part, and say Object, Compound Path, Make. And it has put those two things together as one shape. Now that's different than a group, a compound path, so that's different than a group. Now I want you to pick that up and put it over the top of the first palette that we made. And let's grab the rotate tool and just rotate it some, kind of like that. We're going to use a new tool called Intertwine. So let me show it to you really quick. So let's say we've got something like that, and I want the C to kind of pop up but then go behind that. I'm going to use this new Intertwine tool, Object, Intertwine, Make. And now what you can do is go and say, I would like that to be on the top, but I want that to be still behind it. Do you see how it kind of intertwined them together like that? So it's a pretty cool little tool. So we're going to use that with this. We're going to select the brush, shift, select your palette, say Object, Intertwine, Make, and then we're going to tell it this part right here, I want that to be behind. So now it looks like that part is behind. Let's go ahead and save. So we've now made all of our icons, so we don't really need this icon JPEG anymore. I'm going to unlock it and then pick it up and drag it down here into the trash can and let it go. It's now gone. So we're pretty good, but so for this we need to use the Align panel. Let me kind of explain this to you a little bit. If I go with my selection tool and select all four of these, and you can use it two ways. You can look in Properties and you've got this simple aligns right here, but you can also open up the actual Align panel, which is right here. So it's got several things. It's going to ask me how do I want to align it. So if I just say align to the center, it aligned them, but that might not be what I want. Let me undo that, Control Z. I could align it to our actual artboard, meaning our piece of paper. When I hit Align Now, it put it actually in the center of the paper. If I hit align vertical, it's going to actually put that in the middle of the circle. So let me undo that. So the difference here is if I align to the selection, or I can align to the artboard. The other one is align to key object. So let's say I tell it, I want you to align all of these to one of these objects' center. So now that I've turned on key object, I just have to tell it which object is the key object. So first off, let me change all these to a different color so it'll make it easier. So if I say align to key object, it's telling it, well, I want you to align it to one of these objects. So let me choose which object. I'm going to select this one. And you see how that's got a blue box around it? So now if I were to say, I want you to align to the center of an object, it's going to align all of them to where that one is. So let's change it and say I want this one to be my key object. Now when I say align to that one, notice it's completely different. The same thing with something like distribute. If I distribute the vertical centers, it's going to distribute it based on that one. If I distribute it based on the artboard, it's going to distribute it based on what is in that artboard. So that is the idea behind key alignment. So we know that we have these things in the right area. So let's go down to layers and open all of these up so we can see them. You need to unlock your background layer. So we know that the blue layer goes with this one right here. So let's say shift and select that one too. So notice that group and that rectangle are selected. So we need to make sure this thing is centered inside the blue correctly, but instead of just clicking these center buttons, I want to say I want you to do it to a key object. So for instance, if I do it right now and I say align to center, it's centering it with the artboard. That is not what I want. Let me undo that. I want to use key object and say I want you to center it based on this. Now when I say center, it's going to put that exactly in the center. So let's do that with the next one. Rectangle. The pink rectangle goes with the CD. So click shift. That. We're going to align it to the key object. So click the pink box and center the CD. We're going to grab the yellow rectangle. Shift. Key object is yellow. Now this looks great and it's so close to done. But let's say we are making a bunch of artwork using these icons. Right now they're all separated, they're not on their backgrounds, so we need to be more organized, and I will be checking this when I'm grading. So we need to put them together with what they go with. So grab your direct selection tool. I'm just going to select these two and I'm going to say Control G for group, and you can see those have grouped those together. I'm going to now double click on the icon and rename this painting icon. I'm going to select these, Control G. This one's called film icon, drafting, and music. So now we no longer need this one called backgrounds. You can just pick this up and drag it into the trash can. So I will be looking to see that these are nice and organized. We have this saved, so just say Control S and you are done. So attach that to the Blackboard assignment, and I hope you've learned how to create your first vector graphics.